So we're gonna start for the last presentation. And again, I want to thank everybody for your patience and your interest and your attention. So I'm going to start with a song because it's a good to call people out there. And it's another Sasquatch song. This one is from a pretty local tribe from the Okanagan. It was taught to me by an elder called Dan Nanamkin. And I can say a little story. The Okanagan and Sinites tribe, the local tribe, are pretty close related. They're part of the interior Salish linguistic family. In their language, the Sinites call the Sasquatch Stenwiken. They have many stories about the Stenwiken. One that is quite interesting that I find is how that explains a bit of the difference between us and the Sasquatch. It says that in the old days, the Stenwiken could communicate with people in telepathy until with time people started losing the ability to communicate in telepathy. So the Stenwiken couldn't communicate anymore with us humans, the Sinites in this case. So they asked the Creator for an articulate language, so they could speak with us humans. So they were given the ability to use articulate language and to use words to communicate with us humans, but they don't need them between themselves because they are telepathic. So this is a local Sasquatch story about the Stenwiken from the Sinites. So I'll start by doing this song from the Okanagan. It's an honor song for Sasquatch. Okay. Well, it's a very nice group today. Very nice to see all the beautiful faces and souls here are coming into this spiritual gathering. So there is two things mainly that I'd like to talk about. The first one is interspecies communication from the peaceful spiritual perspective, peaceful approach. And the other thing is multidimensional shamanism. So these two things basically they lead to each other, they go hand in hand. For instance, in shamanism, which is the oldest spiritual path of humanity found around the world, in many different forms, basically it's the same understanding that we are all connected, we are all related. Every living being is part of the great circle of life. So every being is sacred and important. So that's what shamanism and all the ancient traditions have been teaching as a basic guideline. There is the word shaman itself, which comes from the Tungus language of Siberia, means spirit person. So shamanism in all its forms is basically a way to teach us to learn and communicate about with the spirit world, with the spirit beings, in all their forms. So, for instance, the departed ones, and the souls that are lingering around or that visit us, the ancestors, but also with other species. Every shamanic tradition teaches that when we go and pick some plants, we honor their spirit, we give thanks, we ask permission, because they are sentient beings, they are consciousness. So if we treat this medicine that we use with this kind of respect, it's going to come back to us. This medicine is going to give us the blessings. In the same way as with the animals, when in the shamanic cultures, when they go hunt, they ask for permission. They ask the spirit of the animal, the greater spirit of their species, to provide, to send one of theirs that wants to give their life to feed the tribe. So animals are honored and people is spoken to and listened to. Not just for hunting, but for all kind of communication. So shamanism basically is very, very closely related to interspecies communication. There is a little anecdote that comes to my mind. Last time we went on the mountain there, I had just told Jules the morning before about one tradition the Anishinaabe showed me, is that when you see a raven fly, you can ask the raven to drop his pack for you. And the raven, if the raven turns upside down, that means he heard you and gave you a blessing. That happened to me about 3 or 4 times in my life. But I was just telling that story to Jules the other day, and we went on the mountain. Dean was there too. And we went on the mountain, and as we got there, I was a raven. And I said, "Hey raven, drop your pack." The raven flipped twice and turned around. So this is just an example to show that animals have consciousness, and they can hear us, they can hear our thoughts and our intentions. So this brings us to interspecies communication. Once we know that there are other intelligent beings out there, whether animals, even plants, or other two-legged related, like the Sasquatch, the star beings. So what is the next step is to learn to communicate with them. Well, we won't go too deep into the conventional scientific approach that want to bring their agenda and want like a corpse or DNA or photos or whatever They don't go to communicate. They go to take for their own benefit, their own interest. So that's why they don't catch much and they don't see much. Because the Sasquatch hear them. And the Sasquatch are very open to communicate with humans, but the first thing they look at is our hearts, our soul. If we are loving beings, if we are peaceful, if we are rising our consciousness towards connecting with them. That's what opens the door. That's what makes the contacts possible and happening. So I'd like to do a little paranormal survey, which is always interesting. So I would like to see, for instance, first question, how many people here have had any kind of encounters or phenomenon they witnessed or experienced with non-physical being? Can you raise your hand? Oh, that's a good proportion. Next question, how many people here have had any kind of encounter, experience, or witnessed phenomena related to UFOs or ET? Oh, how many people here have had experience or contacts or phenomenon with Sasquatch? Well, that's a pretty good proportion. So this is a pretty high group. So that's why we do these gatherings, because many people have experiences and don't talk about it. There are different processes they go through when these things happen. The first one is denial. It's called cognitive dissonance. It means when we see or hear or witness whatever, something we don't know, and we think it doesn't exist because we don't know it. Or it's impossible because we cannot understand it. So that is a very common human reflex to keep us into our safety of the well-known. But it's not how we learn. So that's this phenomenon of cognitive dissonance that makes a lot of people just brush off in the back of their mind whatever experience they had, selective memory, whatever they either want to forget about it or bury it, or they don't want nobody to think they're crazy or whatever. So there's a good amount of people who have had experiences but won't talk about it. One example, it was on my birthday last year. I'll make the story short. I opened the map and said, where do I go for my birthday? And the first thing I read was Sasquatch Park, Harrison Hot Springs, the Sasquatch capital of the world. So I went up there and I got there, and there was a nice big forest, but the camping area was pretty jam-packed. And there was about 150 people in the campground. And I went to take a walk on the trail and passing by people and everything. So I thought to myself, well, nothing's gonna happen here, too many people. Why did they call me here? I was at that point when the night fell and I started hearing calls coming down from the mountain. Well, they have a wide variety of vocals and calls. The one I heard the most is what I call a friendly hoot, or whook, or whatever you want to say it. It's like saying hi. It's their way of saying, hey, I'm here. So when I heard that coming down, I said, well, it was Sasquatch, but nobody noticed. Next thing, the Sasquatch is on the edge of the campground and screams. So everybody went like, and next campground, the little girl asked me, Dad, what was that? And he said, maybe a Sasquatch, because we were at Sasquatch Park. So she got afraid. She said, no, go away. So the Sasquatch released a long, 1 minute long, loud complaint, which was really full of emotion. I want to attempt to that's very but the Sasquatch kind of expressed, that's what I heard, sadness. All those people invading his woods and telling him he cannot walk by. So everybody at that moment, everybody ran into their cars and campers and shut the light off, and when the dead quiet into 1 minute. The whole campground, everybody was in bed. And the Sasquatch just kept walking across the campground, rooting around, until I heard footsteps next to me, and my Sasquatch guide was there and told me, teaching with that. One of the things is that they can surprise and teach us in ways we don't expect. And the teaching there was that out of all those people, 150 people, I was curious. I want to go talk to the people in the morning who's heard that, everybody heard it, who's got something to say about it. I woke up around 9, everybody was gone.
Everyone did?
Yeah, so, that made me think, how many out of all those people will ever talk about it? How many will just explain it away, oh, it was a drunk guy, or it was a bear, or whatever. So how many people are left that will realize what they experienced there, or even want to know about it, learn about it? So that's why we don't hear more about Sasquatch than this, but they've been around, they've been meeting people, and there are more and more reports coming out. We have can find thousands of reports online of the family who saw one cross the road, or saw one across the valley in the mountain, or the hunter or the fisherman. But we hear also more and more stories and reports of people communicate with them. So, okay, so that we'll cover interspecies relation from one end of the spectrum to the other, especially for Sasquatch. Let's start with Sasquatch. Give us a good example into the whole spectrum. So first of all, there's two kind of ways of people regarding Sasquatch, two kind of attitude. There's the believers and the non-believers. The believers, according to a survey at least, in the state of Washington, which is neighboring us, there's about 36% of the people who believe in Sasquatch. So that's pretty important. That's a good third of the population. And there's about 12% of the people who have had an experience or know firsthand someone who had an experience. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of people. Why don't we hear so much about it is different reasons. First of all, there's a huge cover-up. some world powers who want control over us don't want us to know that we have a very highly intelligent relative out there, let alone that they can teach us and help us solve our problems. So there's been a covert genocide of Sasquatch since many generations. It goes back thousands of years, as well as cover-up of all the evidence that have been provided for thousands of years. Kelly mentioned the Melba Ketchum Sasquatch Genome Project from Austin, Texas, for the 5-year study over 100 DNA samples of Sasquatch. So people who say, where's the evidence? They have to do their homework. Yeah?
I have received a story hitchhiking in the Spokane Valley here from a wild forest firefighter who was fighting at Harrison, and they got there on the first day. They got there when the fires were racing up over the hills, and they found a corpse that was 9 feet and hairy all over. And they told the foreman, and the foreman brought in some government people, and the government people told them they can't talk about this, they can't talk about it with each other, they can't talk about it with their spouses, and their spouses. Yeah, and all of that, and really emphasized it. And even the guy wouldn't tell me the story, but eventually I got half the story out of his wife, and etc. So and they took the corpse. They've got them.
Yeah, so that's the first account. Well, there's many stories like that, like Mount St. Helens, when it erupted, they apparently found 14 bodies of Sasquatch. There's stories of Sasquatch being shot and stuff like that. And it goes way back. We can actually go way back into the native legends to learn about interspecies communication and relations. Just about every tribe, in North America at least, and many around the world, have stories about Sasquatch. They have knowledge of them. Not every tribe has the same relation. Examples from right here in BC, there's Chinchan and Tlingit tribes in the northwest coast of BC, where they've had wars and battles with the Sasquatch. They've had, they killed some, and they've had, we could say, karmas or karmic relations. So they tend to stay away and to fear them. There are other tribes, like the Coast Salish, where they include Sasquatch in their ceremonies. They do offerings to them, and they consider them as friends and as relatives. So that shows right then that the interspecies relations are pretty complex. Depends on what we do. Just give a small anecdote that I believe it's worth mentioning. When I went last May on the coast for a family gathering and later a sweat lodge, where it was right by the seashore. First time I ever did a sweat lodge by the seashore, with at the home of the George family, the family of Chief Dan George, the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, north of Vancouver. And we just did our sweat lodge like usual, and between the 4 rounds we take breaks. So after the second round we got out, and the wife chief, the chief's wife, started talking about they have Sasquatch around, out of the blue. And she said they hear them a lot, calling and knocking on trees and breaking branches. And she says one of her friends had a little ones coming around her house. And so, wow, I said, wow, that's really interesting. I'm a Sasquatch communicator. Authored a couple books. And so, wow, they were all interested. They started asking me questions. And so all this time there was this grandfather there, the elder presiding that ceremony. He didn't say a word. So they turned to him and they say, and you, grandfather, what do you know about Sasquatch? So they didn't know his story yet until then. I was really honored to be there to hear it. Because even among themselves, if you don't ask, you don't hear it. So he said, well, the Sasquatch, he said, I feed them. He said, I see the little ones, they play with the little people. The program, however you want to call them. And he said they can shape-shift. They can turn into stones or trees or animals. Or they can disappear if they don't want you to see them. He said you see them only if they let you see them. And he said they're much smarter than us. They can fly spaceships. And he told us a story of his uncle who was hunting on a mountain many years ago. And he saw a spaceship land. And 4 tall white beings walking out carrying a 6 Sasquatch. And they left him in a cave and left. And his uncle went and saw the 6 Sasquatch, so he brought water and food and medicine. And after 2 days, the Sasquatch was healed and left. So this is a story from a traditional native elder. So this is what they have been, this knowledge they have been keeping for generations and generations that we are finding out now for ourselves or by ourselves. So, okay, we'll carry on with the interspecies spectrum. So there's the non-believers, the majority of people, and there's the believers. Let's take that section, and now there's a whole spectrum of people within the believers. We'll start by the lower end, let's say. There's the hunters. The monster hunters, the big ape hunters, all those big macho guys who go out with infrared Google and camouflage and guns, and four-wheeler chasing after Sasquatch, and they wonder why they never catch them. First of all, they can be heard a mile before they come, and second of all, the Sasquatch can hear their thoughts days and miles and miles before they ever show up. So by the time they get there, you might find a track, be a little hair if they're lucky or something. But that's all they know about Sasquatch. Why? Because that's it's a violent approach. It's not a peaceful approach. It's wanting to conquer. There's one species on this planet, us, Homo sapiens, haven't conquered yet. But keep trying, guys, if you won't do it. Because they are smarter than us. And not only smarter, they are much more advanced psychically. So yeah, they do disappear, they do teleport. They can have object move, telekinesis, whatever. They have all those powers. And so if we go with our infrared goggles, we won't see anything. So the next level, well, there's also, I should put in those levels, there's also some kind of, I don't want to put a label, but group that sees the Sasquatch as like demons and fallen angels and Nephilim, all that kind of negative connotation. Of course, those people don't talk with us. They don't know that. So again, it's trying to put our own conception on whatever is out there, and it doesn't work. So let's move up a little bit on the scale, and the next level is people who at least are no-kill. If you go on Facebook, for instance, you can find 200-300 Bigfoot groups and pages, and there's a portion who are no-kill. That means we're not about trying to kill them. Still, it's a wide spectrum of beliefs and opinions and theories. The no-kill community, we can say. There's people who are basically after a big ape still, or primitive man. Everybody's guess is good. Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, another hominid. But Sasquatch are neither one or the other. People who are after very much, we can count the scientific researchers in there that are very much after physical proof. It seems like they never get enough. Well, we can just do a little 3-4 minutes historic revision about Sasquatch. We know Sasquatch, as I mentioned, was in just about every native tradition of this continent, but they were elsewhere. We all know the Yeti in Tibet. India had the Vanara. A Numan was actually a shaman. The Vanara people. Vanara means forest people. And some of the most gifted could have those psychic powers. They could lift tremendous weights, and they could fly, they could manifest objects, shapeshift, and all those things. So that's what we find out with Sasquatch too, how they are. And in China, they have the Yeren, which is hairy man. They also have the story of Sun Wukong, which was what they call the Monkey King in English translation. That it's a very advanced, intelligent, psychic character that lived with his people back then and helped our planet defend itself from, for instance, the Dragon Kings, as they call them, or other invading species. And they were taken to the heavenly palace, and they learned the arts of shapeshifting and all those things. So there again, that's an ancient Chinese story that mentions those beings. In Australia, we have the Yowie, or the Yahoo. It used to be called Yahoo first. 1830, around the 1830s, even in America, before anybody ever heard of Sasquatch or Bigfoot, they were the Yahoos. That's how they were called. And that term was already used simultaneously in Australia, so it was already a worldwide phenomenon back then. The Yahoos, well, Daniel Boone claimed he shot a 10-foot tall Yahoo, and it's even at his museum. The story is in his history. David Crockett said he saw a Yahoo appear to him and tell him, "Don't go to Fort Alamo, you're going to be killed." And that's what happened a month later. And he said he vanished like a vapor. So back then, that's historic records that talk about interdimensional Sasquatch. So we're not just making this up now. There's, we could go back, like, I forgot to mention the Sumerian, who have the story of Enkidu. Enkidu is the wild man. It was covered with hair. It was a giant. It was really strong. And that became friend with Gilgamesh, which was an Anunnaki, which means sky people on Earth. So there again, we got a story of that they flew in the sky and traveled the world and fought some monsters and stuff. But there again, we have this theme that the big hairy man, the wild man, has been there since the beginning and in touch with the stargate. So we can go through history. There's many famous cases. Leif Erikson, the first Vikings that came around 1050 on the East Coast. They describe large, hairy giants throwing stone at their ships. Artello, the first Spanish to map all the West Coast, long before British Columbia existed. All the way to Alaska, 1570, the Spanish had mapped all the West Coast. They were coming to, started coming back then to Vancouver Island to trade for sea otter pellets. First report, they saw a big hairy giant throwing stones at the ships. So, I mean, their examples are by the hundreds. We cannot cover them all. That's just to say that the Sasquatch has been part of our history forever. So, interspecies communication. Once we adopt the peaceful approach, at least not going to harm or kill or hurt beings we don't know, or we don't know much about, well, there's a possibility of communication there. So from within the believer community, there's another two categories. I mean, within the non-kill community, there is the part that that still believes Sasquatch is an animal or physical being. There is the part that believes there's more to it than flesh and blood. And there is, we can say also, there's two main groups there. There's the experiencers and the non-experiencers. Experiencers are people who, like, probably about 2/3 or 3/4 of the people here that rose their hands. People who had some kind of Sasquatch experience. It can be, there's many different ways they can live, they can communicate with us. They can leave messages. For instance, you can find footprints. You can find glyphs, or what some people call glyphs, which might not be the best term because glyphs means a scripture and writing symbol. I'm not sure if they're really writing or just basically doing art. From my experience, it's like more like they use sticks and draw a picture that has a telepathic meaning for you. There's people who try to translate our alphabet, or maybe it's a rune, maybe it's an A or an X, or I'm not quite sure about that. What I know is that they do leave stick symbols. That's another way to communicate. They also do structures. We found structures there that is showing on this drawing book there. Just 2 weeks ago back here, we went about 15 miles up in the bush, a very remote place. And we were actually out there to find a structure I had seen 3 years ago, which we didn't find, but we found these. It's a piece of art. There again, people, some people, researchers and stuff, think that they do that for a shelter or something, but some of them are like this. There was even a little leprechaun house. So they don't do that to live under a frame of branches. They don't need a frame of branches to live under. first of all. Second of all, it's not always big enough for them. They do that as a work of art. And in front of those, right in front of those structures, there were plates of bark, I think 2 if I remember well, where they had placed all delicately, all different kinds of little leaves and flower, each species separate, like honoring all the living plants, the medicines that land. Humans don't do that very much. We would probably leave some of our man-made stuff up there. But going around, taking time to pick all the little plants that grow, to leave on the bark in front of those structures, that shows a sense of sacredness. It's not just, well, maybe the kids build some to play. As some people think that's why they do that, but there's more to it. We all felt, the 3 of us were there, very deep sense of sacredness, like this place was important for them and they consecrated it for whatever reason, maybe just to greet us when we went there. So that's another way they have to communicate: structures, glyphs, gifts. There's people who do habituation. I don't like that word when we talk about Sasquatch, because we're not trying to domesticate them. We're not trying to lure them or with baits or whatever. It's just like that's what habitation means. But there's a gifting. Gifting is there's people, like we do, when we go out in the woods, especially places we know where they're at, we bring some offerings. It could be food, no junk food please. It could be stones, feathers, little shiny bead, crystals, whatever we would give a friend. And it's the intention that counts, of course. But whatever we would give a friend, it's a good way to make friends with them. So that's the next level, because they can sometimes bring back, or even without you giving anything, they can give you gifts. Some of us have experienced that with gems appearing on their tables and stuff like that. So these are all, so far, pretty much physical ways of communicating, using the elements, whatever the resources around. But there it goes deeper. We start talking, we're already into communication now. We start going toward telepathy. Telepathy is a natural gift we all have. It's just like dreaming. We all have this, we just don't pay attention enough, or we don't practice, so we don't realize it. But every time we think, every time we have an emotion, our subtle body emanates particles. So it's an energy field that, so even if we don't speak, our thoughts influence our environment. And that is a telepathy we all practice every day. When we start paying attention and being conscious of this, we can start channeling this telepathy.